Oh, for God's sakes. Greetings, everyone. Unsafe Kibble here. Today we are going to be doing a ranking of low-level games of Final Fantasy. So I'll be looking at their difficulty, how enjoyable they were, and just giving them an overall ranking. So if you've made it this far, thank you, and I hope that you enjoy. When I learned that the Pixel remasters on console were going to have a boost to eliminate leveling, I absolutely had to play them. I love low level games, which is exactly what it sounds like. You try to beat the game without leveling or with leveling as little as possible. So, with that, let's get to the ranking of where these games sit in low level game. Dead last on my list at number 6 is Final Fantasy IV. Why is this one so low? Well, in all honesty, it broke my heart. You can complete all of Final Fantasy IV without leveling, except for the final boss, and that just really irritated me, especially because it was a patch that made it impossible to do this game at super low level. Beyond that, the game is really frustrating from a low level perspective because of the lack of changes that can be made. You are locked into one particular party and you don't really have any options for switching people out. Furthermore, certain bosses lock you into using particular characters in a particular way, such as Barbarecia and the need to jump with Cain. In my low level run, this was complicated by the fact that my aim was so low that the fight ended up taking nearly an hour to complete. Just overall, the game may be better than what came before, but from a low level game perspective, it was awful. The hardest boss by far is Zeromus in this run. There was a patch on the Steam edition which accelerated Zeromus and made speed anchoring with Cecil in the center not possible to do anymore. That same thing has happened in the console editions. Now, speedrunners have developed a strategy, I'll put the link in the description, which allows you to do a similar jumping over the big bangs for Zeromus. But in a low level game, this requires you to level up to 25 and use the pink armor. Thus, there's not really any boss that's going to be harder than the one boss that requires you to level. Coming in at number 5 is the original Final Fantasy. Early on, the game was absolutely fantastic. I actually developed a lovely rivalry with the Moogle boss as we were trying to get through the game and pushing each other to get lower and lower. Moogle boss, to his credit, was the first person to complete this game at level 2, which is the lowest level that you can complete this game at, in our opinion. Now, when you take that first level, what party members you take, all of those are variables as you're trying to get through this game. Once you complete Lich and once you complete the Ice Cavern, you are able to get access to tonics, and at that point the game turns into kind of a one-trick pony. You start the boss fight, you throw tonics on your damage dealer until their HP is 999. Then you begin casting Temper over and over again with Streak Tonics or with the spell Temper, and you win the game. So the one-trick pony aspect of Final Fantasy I brings this one down a little bit. The hardest fight in this type of run is going to be Lich. Lich is an absolute beast. 33% of the time, it will cast a spell that will wipe your entire party at level 2, no matter what you do. So it is an RNG race. That is why level 2 is probably the lowest that you can get this done at, because you need the Temper spell. If you could find some way to access tonics prior to Lich, it would be the same fight as anyone else. But that makes it the hardest fight, and the lack of any alternative strategies is what kind of brings this one down. Coming in at number 4 on this ranking is going to be Final Fantasy II. The black sheep of the family, Final Fantasy II frankly just gets better than Final Fantasy I from a low-level game perspective. All of the complaints that people typically level at Final Fantasy II, such as the complex leveling system, the need to hit yourself, none of that matters in a low-level game because you're trying to stay as low as possible. I did multiple runs of this game. One was just allowing passive leveling. The second one was abusing the visiting party members, leveling them to get in-game gear, and then getting the final boss as absolutely low as possible. Now, as you would expect, there are many more ways to beat this game than in Final Fantasy I, which was the one-trick pony, because you have the visiting party members. You also have Blood Sword and Osmosis and Warp access through item casting. So overall, there was a lot more variety to this game than was in one, and therefore I enjoyed it a lot better. There were also none of the hard sticking points that occurred in Final Fantasy IV or Final Fantasy I, so that makes it a little better in my opinion. The hardest boss in this game is the Hell Emperor, if you mean the hardest boss, but the first time you meet the Emperor, you have to run through a gauntlet of 3 consecutive fights, and you must cast Warp and get Warp to hit in that sequence. So depending on how you want to slice up one boss versus a series of encounters, those would be the hardest encounters in my opinion. Coming in at number 3 is Final Fantasy 3. I loved this game. It was the first time I had ever played the 2D version, and after completing it at low level game, I went back and did the challenge run in a 3D version. So, I mean, I adored this game. What made it so good was the variety of jobs and options that you had to combine things together. Now, the jobs weren't as complex as 5 within their uniqueness, but there was still a lot of variety here, which made some of the boss fights really interesting and allowed you to explore different combinations to get through. It was exceptionally grindy. And the way you leveled up, there was a particular method you had to use to gain the most HP on each level up, because the amount of hit points you gain is random. So that kind of dragged it down. But overall, I really appreciated what the game brought to offer. The most difficult boss in the game in the 2D Pixel Remaster version is probably going to be Cloud of Darkness. You have to get a certain combination of attacks in order to defeat them low level because of the hit points. Shout out to Arima, the I-Boss, as one of the Guardians, as the second most difficult boss fight. In the 3D version, obviously, it's the Iron Giant. So that is basically what I have to say about 3. Coming in at number 2 on this ranking is going to be Final Fantasy VI. I know it's the greatest game of all time, but I simply don't get it. Every time I play this game, I'm not that impressed. Now, playing it through at low level improved my view of this game, but it just is not the greatest game of all time for me. Playing through at low level, overall the game was much harder early on than it was at the end of the game, because I frankly did not outlaw any of the abusive tactics that you can use to basically steamroll the game. Most prominently, Step Mine or Traveler, which after 300 something thousand steps allows you to do 9,999 damage. Overall, it was interesting getting to see all the characters, but I did not find the combinations as manipulatable as in Final Fantasy III. So it got a higher rating because the overall quality of the bosses and the tactics that were used were more interesting. This game was also significantly longer than any of the others that came before it, except for 5. 1, 2, 3, and 4 were very short. The hardest boss in this game absolutely has to be the final boss, the 4-stage bosses of Kefka. That was incredibly annoying, even using overpowered strategies. Other bosses were irritating along the way, but nothing really compared to that one. It was an okay fight. There were some frustrating things along the way. For example, the fight against Altos the first time. My mandatory survival party member kept getting killed, but overall, probably the second best. And in our number 1 spot, the only game left, Final Fantasy V. This was by far the best game to low-level run, in my opinion. From the high ranking of 3, you probably realize that I enjoy the job system. I find the variety it brings to be significantly better. This was also my first time playing Final Fantasy V, so that led to a lot of frustration early on in the run. But as I began to understand some of the jobs and unlock them, it became much easier. The job system allows for infinite combinations, and that's even true in a no-level run. There are Beastmaster and Chemist, which are ridiculously OP and allow you to get through the game. But unlike Final Fantasy VI, which getting some of those overpowered skills felt absolutely broken, Final Fantasy V did not feel as broken to me, even with the ridiculous skills. In some cases, I had to combine things in interesting ways to get through, and overall, I was really pleased with how the game worked at that lack of HP. The hardest bosses in the game absolutely were Omega. Shinryu was an absolute pushover. I know there's apparently a debate about which is harder. I don't understand the debate. Omega steamrolled me for several hours before I managed to find something that worked. Overall, it was the best at low level. It had variability, it had different strategies, it was enjoyable, it was challenging without any just rock hard brick wall stopping points. So there it is. That would be my ranking of the Pixel Remasters in low level games. I hope you enjoyed it. I will add in the PlayStation 1 and 2 games as soon as I finish recording my Final Fantasy VIII run at low level and getting all the videos done. So, hope you enjoyed it.